From the Gray Man Briefing, this is a summary of recent developments regarding the Second Amendment, cybersecurity, protests, supply chain disruptions, national security, law and order, free speech, censorship, government oversight, and more.
For the prepared citizen, it's critical to remain aware of the events, developments, as well as the emerging trends and threats in your environment. This allows us to take preventive steps and courses of actions to deter further decline, unrest, overreach, and insecurities, or to overcome disruptions, shortages, and hazards. For the Grayman Briefing, Super Resi will be reading out the latest Summary of Recent Developments, or SWORD, as published by the Grayman Briefing. To get this news and intel delivered in real time, unredacted and with analysis, join at www.graymanbriefing.com. That's Gray with an A.
Let's begin today with the Supply Chain and Labor Force Briefing. In Sonoma County, California, animal rights and climate change activists lobbied for a proposed ballot measure to ban concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFO. This is commonly known as factory farming. So Measure J is set for the November 2024 ballot. It aims to eliminate large-scale farms in the county. The Agricultural Commissioner's Office estimates the measure could result in a $3 million loss due to inspections and job losses, not to mention the broader economic and supply chain impacts. If passed, this measure would make Sonoma County the only location in the U.S. where CAFO farming is prohibited, potentially ending the local supply of beef, dairy, chicken, and eggs. This speaks to a greater trend evidenced by the Census of Agriculture, who reported a significant decline in U.S. farms, with 141,000 fewer farms and a decrease of 20 million farm acres from 2017 to 2022. In Marion County, Illinois, a fire broke out at Farina Farms, this is Wabash Valley Produce, destroying several buildings and requiring assistance from multiple fire departments. Approximately 1.2 million chickens, including egg-laying hens, were lost in that incident. Wabash is the nation's 24th largest egg producer. The cause of the fire remains under investigation. Republicans have cautioned President Biden against utilizing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or the SPR, as a political instrument amid increased summer gasoline prices. They argue that the SPR, in this manner, could compromise national security and the reserve's abilities to respond to genuine emergencies. Gasoline prices are increasing as the summer driving season commences, affecting consumers worldwide. The increased demand for fuel, coupled with supply constraints, has led to higher prices at the pump. Speaking of gas prices, over in Tijuana, Mexico, nearly half of the gas stations there have shut down due to a gasoline shortage, causing significant disruptions for residents and travelers. In Greenville, South Carolina, data reveals that 60,000 of their residents are experiencing food insecurities. This is also happening in Maryland, where the cost of food is increasing. Grants are being issued to address the underlying causes there in Maryland for why these food insecurities are happening and provide critical support to those in need. In India, the pharmaceutical industry there is preparing to address drug shortages here in the U.S., ensuring that the essential medications needed remain available despite ongoing supply chain issues. Increased freight rates and shortages of cargo containers are causing a renewed supply chain disruption, similar to the challenges faced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Auto shippers are navigating new supply challenges affecting the delivery of vehicles and both vehicle parts. Rising shipping costs, congestion at global ports, and semiconductor shortages are significantly increasing expenses for auto manufacturers. In Oregon, the Campbell Soup Company is closing one of their larger plants and investing $230 million in supply chain upgrades to streamline operations and enhance efficiency amid ongoing challenges. Shifting categories to civil unrest, on June 8th, pro-Palestinian activists plan to surround the White House in Washington, D.C. The protesters plan to be dressed in all red and will form a human chain approximately 2 miles long around the White House to symbolize their belief that Israel has crossed a red line and that President Biden has failed to respond adequately. Now moving into commercial oversight and health and safety. Pfizer has agreed to settle over 10,000 lawsuits alleging that the company failed to warn patients about the cancer risks associated with the anti-heartburn drug Zantac. The lawsuits filed in various state courts have not had their settlement details disclosed. Zantac, initially marketed by Glaxo Holdings, which is GlaxoSmithKline now, was pulled from the market back in 2020 after the FDA found carcinogenic substances known as NDMA in the drug. Other companies, including Sanofi and GSK, are also facing similar lawsuits. An obtained document reveals that medical doctors were paid cash incentives to promote COVID-19 vaccines. This was between 2021 and 2022. Under the COVID-19 Provider Vaccine Incentive Program by Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield Medicaid, doctors could earn up to $375 for each patient they vaccinated. Reports indicate that similar incentives were offered by multiple health insurance providers to pressure doctors to recommend COVID-19 vaccines. Now let's look at the political unrest, government oversight, and elections briefing. In New York City, former President Trump was found guilty of all 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Sentencing is scheduled for July 11th, just 4 days before the Republican National Convention. While it depends on how you're looking at this, some people say Trump could face a maximum of 136 years, but it's not expected that those various charges would be separated, they would be concurrent. So the max would probably be 4 years, although legal analysts do not expect any incarceration. Despite conviction, Trump can still run for president and is expected to appeal. President Biden is likely to use Trump's felon status as a talking point during his campaign. The DA's office there in Manhattan reportedly leaked what they were searching for as far as a sentence, and they are apparently looking for a 1-year prison sentence for Trump. The conviction has given Trump a boost, and I believe he made around $50 million in the first 24 hours after it was announced he was convicted. So it appears to be helping him rather than hurting him. We'll see how things progress. Moving on, in Campbell County, Kentucky, a high school graduate had his diploma withheld after deviating from the approved script during his commencement speech. The student praised God, which was not part of the pre-approved speech. The school administration cited the need to adhere to the prepared script and withheld the diploma. Pending a meeting with the school board or principal, he will probably get his diploma. Critics argue this action violates the First Amendment. Moving on, in an interview with Fox News, former President Trump stated that if reelected, he would declassify and release files related to the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the assassination of JFK, and records on Jeffrey Epstein. Over in Rhode Island, two bills, it's S2693 and H8013, seek to ban KEI vehicles. These are those small cars and trucks that are like 11 foot by 4 foot wide. Some KEI owners have already had their registrations revoked due to what the state says are safety concerns, despite them having valid inspections. The proposed legislation would restrict the use of KEI cars to roads with speed limits of 35 miles per hour or less. The DMV argues the measure is necessary for safety, while owners see it as an unnecessary restriction on their right to drive affordable and easily repairable vehicles of their choice. And over in Mexico, the country has elected Sheinbaum as its first female and first Jewish president. Sheinbaum is known for her pro-Palestinian and pro-LGBT stances and was an avid supporter of strict COVID-19 regulations such as mask mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Department of Justice has a task force called the Election Threats Task Force, and it's accelerated efforts to secure what they say is to secure the 2024 elections. On May 13th, the DOJ held a meeting regarding that task force, noting a dangerous increase in violent threats against public servants administering elections. The DOJ is intensifying efforts to combat these threats, which endanger democracy, according to them. Critics argue the task force could be used to silence political dissent, warning it might censor online content deemed part of misinformation campaigns. Now moving into the major crime, preparedness, and border security briefings. Homeowners in Southern California have been targeted by sophisticated burglary gangs, primarily from South America, particularly Colombia. These criminals plant hidden cameras in residential yards to spy on homeowners and identify optimal times for break-ins. Authorities have discovered cameras disguised inside the foliage around various neighborhoods. Glendale police warned residents to check their properties for any unusual devices. These gangs often disable security systems and focus on richer areas for their crimes. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, Mustafa Muhammad, a black male convicted felon with a warrant, an active warrant at the time, and he was prohibited from possessing a firearm, shot 5 people, killing 2. Muhammad shot 3 people at a Minneapolis apartment complex and then ambushed a firefighter and police officer who were responding to assist. He killed the officer and another civilian. Officers returned fire and killed Muhammad. And let's move into national security and global security. General Dynamics Land Systems and Joint Systems Manufacturing Center, that's JSMC, announced plans to restart the production of M1 Abrams military tanks, marking the first time since, 25 years ago, they've done a start-to-finish manufacturing of the tank. The initiative is driven by increased orders for the M1A2 tanks from national and foreign armies, along with renewed U.S. government investment in JSMC's production capabilities. The plant will receive significant government funding, with budgets set to rise to $287 million in 2028 and then up to $300 million in 2029 for these upgrades. The 369-acre facility employs 856 people. It also produces various other military equipment. This move will benefit the local economy in Ohio and support the U.S. and its allies' tank modernization efforts, but also points to expected continued global conflict. Additionally, General Dynamics is one of those select defense industry partners that were hit with sanctions by China over their sales to Taiwan. The Egyptian armed forces reportedly opened fire on the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, near Rafah as the IDF was operating along a tunnel near the border. The IDF returned fire, resulting in the death of 1, possibly 2 Egyptian soldiers. Contact was made between higher officials among both countries, and the skirmish was ended. The incident is under investigation, with the sequence of events disputed as far as who shot who first. This marks a rare exchange of fire between the militaries of the two countries, which I don't think the Gray Man briefing has seen anything like that since 1973. Moving over to North Korea, they've increased their propaganda activities against South Korea by sending balloons filled with trash, including human feces possibly, toilet paper, cigarette butts, and other waste. The balloons floated across the border into South Korea, some appearing to have control mechanisms. This follows South Korea-based activist groups reportedly sending 20 balloons carrying anti-North Korea leaflets and USB drives with Korean pop music and videos into North Korea. Previously, North Korea sent balloons containing messages criticizing the South Korean government and the U.S. Moving on, the Biden administration has discreetly authorized Ukraine to conduct strikes within Russian territory, specifically using U.S.-supplied weapons. The directive aims to allow Ukraine to use U.S. weapons for counter-fire purposes against Russia forces hitting or preparing to hit them. And apparently these weapons have now already been used in Russia. Al-Qaeda's General Command issued a statement praising university encampments in the U.S., but called on protesters to engage in jihad and fight against the Jews, Americans, and their allies. The terrorist group supports the assassination and beheading of infidel Zionists and appreciates the movement of Western demonstrators and students. They urge spreading terror into the hearts of Zionists, equating Zionists in the U.S. and the West with Israeli Zionists. And moving into the First and Second Amendment briefing, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled unanimously in favor of the National Rifle Association in a First Amendment case involving New York state officials. SCOTUS held, quote, that the NRA plausibly alleged that then New York State Department of Financial Services, or DFS superintendent, violated the First Amendment by coercing DFS-regulated entities to terminate their business relationships with the NRA in order to punish or suppress the NRA's advocacy, end quote. The case centered around allegations that the superintendent of New York, or of New York's financial services, pressured financial institutions to sever ties with the NRA, which the NRA claimed was an attempt to suppress their speech. This ruling now allows the NRA to continue their lawsuit against New York. And in the cybersecurity and communications briefing, an official with CISA, that's Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, has contradicted prior claims that there is no risk of Signaling System 7, that's SS7, being used to remotely track communications equipment, or cell phones. SS7 is a set of protocols that govern landline and cellular phone services. The official wrote in a public filing that the SS7 and diameter-based location and monitoring exploits have been used successfully against targeted people within the U.S., with unauthorized attempts to access network user location data using SS7 and diameter exploits. 3 commercial cellular carriers in the U.S. were reportedly tracked using this SRI, which is a SYN routing information packet, with subscribers' mobile phone numbers. So basically, CISA said, hey, this official, yeah, he works for us, but this message that he's telling you that these exploits exist, it's unofficial. This is on his personal capacity that he's revealing this data. So CISA's trying to deny it, but yeah, it looks like this tracking's been happening and officials just don't want to admit it. Moving on, AT&T customers experienced nationwide disruptions impacting their ability to call non-AT&T contacts. This also happened with Verizon. So AT&T customers could not contact Verizon customers could not contact AT&T customers, but they could still dial within their own carrier network. They could also still dial 911 and they could still text. The FCC was investigating the reports. Also of note, at the same time this was happening in 20 plus states, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Vermont, North Dakota, the list goes on. 911 services were also disrupted. In some cases, just you could not call 911. FirstNet was not affected. Also, data-related services like FaceTime or third-party apps was not impacted. The outage lasted around 6 hours, and there's been no revealing of what caused it. So we'll continue to monitor this if the briefing posts anything more. That's it for this Gray Man Briefing's sword readout. And if any of these briefings interest you, you can read more into them. The Gray Man Briefing has analysis on most of their briefings, sources on all of their briefings. They're sharing their content on Telegram and Signal and via a weekly email. You can sign up at graymanbriefing.com. That's gray with an A. That's it. Everyone take care and be safe.
Get unredacted, real-time briefings sent via email and through the Telegram and Signal apps by joining the Gray Man Briefing.